Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater. I'm your chairperson today, and on the panel I'm joined by Cynthia Stevens and Richard Whitbread. Our city assessor is Mark Colatrulio, and our admin secretary is Kara Belshaw. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. Statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. And should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with your order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. You will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you could swear parties in, thank you.
Can you swear in?
I will.
Please state your name.
Mark Colatrulio.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth and the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Rocky Nicole.
Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Neufeld and Mr. Colatrulio, and we are going to start with 750 Pembina Highway.
File number 19-4804. The applicant is Colliers International. Roll number 120105162000. The address is 750 Pembina Highway. Roll year under appeal 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The original assessed value under appeal $3,989,000, class code 60 and taxable. We currently have this space tagged with a parcel usage of commercial store. 2 buildings, 3 premises on file, actual year built of 1970, C3 zoning, land area 151,311 square feet. The gross floor area 33,914, and the leasable area is the same. Do you have a recommendation on this file? The recommendation is based on a revision to the excess land that was originally applied to this property. Originally there was about 50% of the land being valued or added to the income value through the excess land. Upon review of the space that I actually, that was measured out for what I considered excess land, it was about 38%. I rounded down to about 35%. There is some details in regards to the calculations of that on page 9 at the bottom of the page. So basically the excess land value calculation, 35% amounts to 52,959 square feet at the modeled land rate of $24.06 to arrive at the 1.274. That's for the excess land, and then adding that into the income value as you see on page 5 to arrive at the $3,483,000 for the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you.
Take your time.
No, it's fine. Yeah, we're going to have to proceed, but on this matter. And I appreciate the assessor's offer, and I think we're close, but you'll probably see why I want to continue on. Do you have more to present then?
I do,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Carry on, thank you.
So part of that initial review on the value was first taking a look at, as in the past, this property, sometimes poor decisions had come out where it was just factoring in land-only value. So for this particular property, when you apply the land-only value, the $24.06 to the total land area, the land value was in at $3,640,000. So the recommendation I have today is actually lower than what the land value would be if the model had put out a land value for the whole thing. But obviously with that, the property is currently improved. There would be some costs incurred with making it vacant and removing the current improvements. Page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to both of our requests for information. The last sale occurred in May of 2003, not super relevant to our reference date today. Page 3, you'll see the rental comparables that I used. I tried to use larger format retail along Pembina Highway and in the surrounding area to the subject property. Now, there are some that are further down Pembina that I use, and that's just the nature of trying to find large retail space along Pembina Highway. But the range here is between $8 and at the high end of $13 a square foot. Page 4, you'll see some of the land comparables that were used. The only thing that since I submitted this, I did some further investigation. Comparables 2 and 3 actually sold on the same date. And when I did some investigation, it did look like it potentially was a multi-parcel sale. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these. But again, there is a range here in regards to a sale price per square foot in regards to just vacant land. Now, some of these vary in regards to the zoning. These are C2, the subject is C3 zoning. But the price per square foot, the low end is $24.77 and it's up to $75.02. So when I was reviewing the modeled land rate at $24.06, I thought it was pretty reasonable considering these sales. But again, the 2 and 3, they may be a multi-roll sale. Page 5, you'll see the income workup with the excess land value added in. So we have here the primary area, the store, 22,886 square feet at a rate of $4.90. Then we have a smaller area within the store, $11.07. And we have an additional area at $4.17. The total potential rent there, $209,974. 6% vacancy, 2% expense allowance, and shortfall at $650 a square foot for a net operating income of $185,592. The cap rate applied 8.4%. The capitalized value is $2,209,429 with the additional excess land value added into that of 1.274, $1,274,000 for the recommendation value at $3,483,000. Page 6, you'll see just some photos of the subject property, map view, an aerial photo. Page 8, you'll see some of the, again, an aerial photo and some of the street view. Page 9 is the excess land calculations. So this particular owner, and you'll see later in the brief, does lease out the space to the Auto House dealership for storage of the vehicles. So you'll see on the aerial photos, they've got cars parked all along the triangular, on page 9 at the top, there's a triangular portion of the land there, and then a rectangular piece in the bottom picture there that was measured out for excess land. Page 10, you'll see the income and expense information as submitted by the owner. That goes through to page 12. Page 12, they've attached a handwritten note to the income and expense mailer. And just under the roll number, you can see income and the auto house at $42,000. So they do get some revenue for renting that space up. Page 13 is some cap rate information. The retail store category does not fall on this table, so there isn't really anything relevant for this particular file. And the addenda just has some information in regards to the 2020 assessment being a fresh look and some cap rate support. Now, Mr. Neufeld in the past has indicated that 2 of these on the back table may be multi-roll sale, I believe, or a portfolio sale. And those are the 2 under the retail table. One on Portage sold May 7, 2017, and 3670 Roblin Boulevard also sold on the same date. So keep that in mind when you're reviewing that. And that was all for my presentation. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
I'll just start with your adjustments, because I'm just trying to understand the adjustment. The total amount of the adjustment was from 3,989 to 3,483.
Correct.
Which is a change of 506,000. You're saying that was all from land value?
So yeah, so what happened was when the value originally went out, 50% of the total land area was being valued under the excess land, so that would be about 75,000 square feet of land.
Oh,
and I've adjusted that downwards to around 50,000.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you see that on the bottom of page 9.
9, you say 58,540, but now you're saying the original number was 75,000.
Yeah, the value that went out at
Okay.
almost 4 million was originally based on a higher percentage for that.
75, okay, got it.
Around 75,000 square feet.
Okay. All right, so other than that, then, were there any other changes to the model, page 5?
No, I don't think so.
Now, when you adjust for excess land, what you've done here is you've mixed the 2 approaches, correct? You've mixed the income approach on the building with direct comparison on the land.
Correct.
Now, how many titles? Are they separate?
No, I believe it's one title.
So why not use the income approach on the land value?
Because they're able to generate income from the excess land.
Right. Why not use the income approach on land value? And then therefore not have to mix methods?
I don't know, typically we would rely on the land sales first, just to kind of get an indication of what the going rate is.
Because they did supply you with the rental information, correct? On page 12?
Yes, they did.
And Auto House, 42,000.
Correct.
That's the north portion,
Yeah, correct.
compounded, right? Pattison is the sign rental,
Correct.
which is in that area, and the last one, Royal.
Yeah, correct.
Is presuming that that's the space, that the south parking lot area? Do you know, or do you know?
The southern rectangular
Yes,
piece, I
yes.
believe that's Auto House.
Oh, okay, so which one is Royal?
Well, Royal would be the store, right?
Yeah, well, I'm just, like, obviously I know a bit more about this property, but the income from the outside of it, outside of the building is listed here at a total of 60,100. So you didn't attempt to match that with your excess land parcels?
No, I do not. No, so I relied on sales, and part of the reason is, and you don't know what the market level, like the market rent for that type of spaces per se. I mean, we have a rent in place, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a market rent. And we don't know the motivation, right? Like the auto house is close by, it's, so.
But these rents that they've reported, it's clear that, there are some costs involved with them as well, correct?
You're looking at page 12 still?
Yeah. And also, page 10.
Yeah, I don't know if you can distinguish though between which tenant, I don't know if you can distinguish the expenses to each of the individual.
Well, listen, that's a fair comment, I understand, but they did provide some information.
They did, yeah.
Okay. Now, on that basis, you didn't attempt to calculate excess land on the income, and had you done that, are you aware what typically the assessment department would put on that for a parameter or cap rate on a land?
I'm not too sure, no.
Okay. If you listen closely, you'll hear it from next door. And have you inspected?
I did not attend this property for the purpose of this hearing. I have attended this property in a personal capacity, but not for this hearing.
And so you've been in there, you know that it's a converted Ford dealership, now run as a sports store.
Correct.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. McBride.
So I'm looking at the revenue on page 12, and I'm looking at Patterson at 5,500. Is that a tenant or is that a signage?
It's a signage, and I believe it's located on the, if you look at page 9, on the triangle piece at the top. Yeah.
That's fine, I understand that.
Yeah.
And so the auto house would be giving them 42,000, and then Royal the place.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I go down to new electrical on page 12. I think it may be repairs of new electrical, $80,000.
Yeah, so it does look like they did some...
Did you have permits for that? Did you?
Don't have that information with me.
That's a lot of them, like
Yeah, it does seem like it's a lot. But no, I don't have the details with me, so I can't really speak to it.
And you don't know if it's a one-time expense or if it's ongoing?
Yeah, to me, that would, if this was an ongoing expense, there would be a problem there at that property to incur that kind of cost.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have the information to confirm or to tell you if it's an ongoing thing or not.
Okay. And on to the land then. Is there a difference between surplus and excess? You're calling this excess land. How do you define excess?
I don't know the exact definition that we would use, but in my mind, the excess land would be any land over and above what's needed to operate the primary holding there. So if
Does it have anything to do with access to that land? If it's excess, it's accessible. If it's surplus, it's not accessible.
I'm not certain. I'm not certain. In this instance, there is access, obviously.
That's why I'm wondering. I thought it was excess land was not accessible, but I may have that wrong. Mr. Neufeld might be able to clear that up when we get there. Okay, no more questions.
Is this over occupied?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. I may ask to help out when we get there. Under your rent, you've got I'm just interested, it's not a very large amount of space in the overall scheme of things, but you've got 7,500 square feet at $11, which is significantly higher than the other two rents. Do you know what that space is?
I suspect that it would be the bike store. I don't know for sure where the three premises are lined up in the property, but I know that the warehouse space, like it's a larger warehouse type building, was given the lower rate because of the nature
So
of
this would be more like a retail store?
Right, like they have like the
Okay.
bike store in there.
Okay, I've never been in the building. Okay. And the cap rate, so you say it's not on the chart. So do you, if you're doing this cycle, if you're doing this type of property, what are your ranges for these, do you know?
I don't have it with me, no, but I know that the process is very much the same. They're modeled between the 20th and 80th percentile, and much like the companies that publish cap rate studies for retail stores, they don't really typically publish that stuff. Typically you see strip, neighborhood, community center, power center.
And there'd be cutoffs for different ages of properties as well?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And the land, so on, where am I looking here? On your top of page 8. So how does that work if it's excess, surplus land, whatever the terminology is, when you've got it split into 2 sections? So, because I'm assuming that the reason for giving it a value is that you're assuming it could be sold, correct? Like the way this is split up, I'm just wondering, how would someone do much with this?
I don't know if it's necessarily that we're considering it excess land because there's subdivision potential. I just think that the property for its current usage has more land than it needs to accommodate the parking requirements and all that sort of stuff. And obviously the Royal Sport doesn't need that parking space because the owner has gone and leased it out and they're able to operate without any issues.
It is kind of a strange, like normally when you see this, it's not this kind of configuration where there's land here and then you've got another parcel over here that is small, so small that I don't think you really can do anything with it, right? Other than rent it out for anything.
Right.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you.
So, at 2, I'm going to ask you the land question.
Sure.
Because technically, looking at the top of your page 8 again, these are 2 very odd pieces of land. And I'm thinking for sure they could not be sold or developed for development. They're too small, they're too irregularly shaped. So then, I'm just wondering why you use land comparable sales to value it. Because I'm assuming page 4 of your land comparable sales is land that has potential to be developed, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So it would not be considered more valuable price-wise than this land?
Well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that there's no development potential. I just think that whoever would be looking at that particular piece of land would have to be creative. There is frontage here on Jackson Avenue. The area of the land there is 42,000 square feet, so it's not a small piece of land by any means. They may have to build a non-rectangular or square building to accommodate the size of the lot. But I don't know if I would go as far as to say that there's no potential to develop.
So access and egress is off Jackson?
Yes, it appears that way.
So that's not as desirable as Pembina?
Correct. Now, that's not to say that potentially they couldn't create an egress point from Pembina, depending on how the development goes or what the plan is for that particular piece of land. The rectangular one is a little smaller. It's 16,000, just over 16,000 square feet. There is access from Pembina, but it's through the Royal lot. So again, if they wanted their own access, they would have to create an egress point onto Pembina. And again, with the development there, they would have to get pretty creative in what kind of building they're putting on there or what they're doing with that space. Absolutely. And I think that the range of sales, if you look at the land sales that are there is a range, and the model comes fairly low on the range, which was kind of my rationale when I had looked at it. That was kind of the consideration. Is that there's a range there, absolutely. They go as high as $75 a square foot. The model's not even putting close to that. And I think that the recommendation that's made, coming in even lower than the overall land value of the whole parcel, is being pretty reasonable and fair.
Just one more question,
Sure.
strictly curiosity. Why wouldn't this excess land be valued as what it's being used as, parking lot? The dreaded word.
I'm not too certain.
Okay. Just wondering.
Yeah, I just think, like, again, it just comes down to, just because it's a parking lot now doesn't mean that if the owner portioned it off and sold it, that it would have to remain a parking lot.
No.
Again, someone would have to be creative in the development.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newfeld, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just one follow-up. You said earlier that there's subdivision potential. What are the costs associated with subdivision, and have they been accounted for in your valuation?
No, they have not been, and I don't know the costs that are associated with it.
And you are aware that there is the dedication fee, there are service fees,
Correct.
and there is the highly controversial impact fee.
There are some fees associated with the subdivision, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm just, part of what I'm going to say is rebuttal, and but I'm first of all, I was just looking at the assessor's workup, and my issue here is that when you're valuing a property, you don't mix methods. You don't. It's like we were all taught in grade 2. When you have a formula for addition, you don't throw multiplication. If you have one for addition, you don't put multiplication or division into the middle of it. The formula doesn't work anymore. It's the same with appraisal. So you can't do direct comparison and income and mix it and add it together and have a number. That's actually one of the first errors I made as a candidate member, for which my mentor severely scolded me, and I had to redo several appraisal reports. But that's the key here. So you stick with income or you stick with direct comparison. And I know the assessment department likes to do this for excess land because it's a simple calculation and it's easy to explain. If you are going to go by the method of mixing methods, then you have to prove, first of all, that you can legally do subdivision. It hasn't been done. Second, you would have to consider subdivision costs. So dedication is 10% of the value created. Impact fees are running, I don't know, something like $140,000 an acre, along with the service fees the last time I checked. So your discount on your land that you're achieved is to the point where, why am I bothering to do this for a couple of dollars to get rid of the land? So it's really not done unless there's an identifiable piece, and it has, for example, the south one doesn't even have its own access, which requires Ben to do a cross-access agreement with the original parcel, which devalues it. And the northern one lacks the exposure. So the proper way, as I mentioned, is to maintain the same method. Now, we haven't given you an income approach, and that's because beginning, as we stated in 2010, we did have an agreement to just look at land value. And I know every year we face the same obstacle, that the assessor, bound by the model, let's bring in our income approach. Now, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the income that the assessor has placed on the main building, other than the management fee, but it doesn't have to be a factor today on this case. When you add land value, the owner has thoughtfully supplied his actual land rents, and the assessment department could have the option of adding those to his valuation and in coming up with a total package based on the income approach. Now, the numbers on that page 12 indicate a gross income of $60,100. The $42,000 is for the larger lot, and the $12,600 was the rent. Now, they have Royal indicated here. They've had a variety of tenants on this site, including other auto dealers on the strip. So it has generated income in both lots. I wouldn't disagree with it. And the Pattison income is not indicated on the assessor's workup as well. So I think it's fair game. There is $60,100 of gross income. Now, the man who fills this out is John, and John is 84, and he's in my opinion, I enjoy talking to him. He's very cantankerous, and I just love that there's people like him who still speak their mind. He doesn't know how to write a statement up. These rents are gross. He owns the stores in the middle, and they're operated within the family. All the income in the stores is owner, and they pay their taxes out of that, and so they charge these land rents. That's all they get. They do not recover taxes from those people. I've been through this in detail, great detail with them, and so John's statement on page 12 saying that realty taxes are paid by the tenant, he really means by Royal Sports as the tenant. However, you have to worry about the risk of, if I provide information that's different than provided. So then let's look at the other costs that he's incurred. We'll forget about the electrical cost, but he does incur management and maintenance. So on that basis, his gross rent, his net rent is at very most $41,200. My personal knowledge is that the net is about $40,000 because the tax allocation on this is about $200,000 based on last year's assessment. Regardless, we know $41,200 is a net number that's on the table. Now, the proper methodology is also don't mix cap rates. So we obviously, the assessor, well, let's have a cap rate of 5% on parking or 6%, and then we're going to run it at 8% on the building. You can't do that either. But then if you come back and say a blended rate supported by the market of comparable sales, it could be done. Now those numbers, had you worked it that way by using an exclusive income approach, if you used a 5% cap rate on the parking lot income, it's an additional $824,000 on the building income, which gets us a total of $3,033,429. So I think that's where they should have been going towards as a model. Now, arguably, cap rate on land rental could be higher than that, but I'm just looking at the bare minimum, and because you'll see where I'm going in the long run. Had they stuck to their income model only, it would have been $3,033,429, rounded to $3,033,000. And in my mind, that would have been a fair number to put forward today. And that would have been the recommendation I was looking for. We have a great deal of experience with this property, and for 6 consecutive years, there was no dispute as to the land value. That's how the amount was set last year at $2,958,000. We have a number of sales on page 1, and now what we were looking for was not pieces of the property, but actual development pieces that were sold on that basis. And we've given you a number of them, and just point out that the ones that's provided by the assessor, disregarding the extremely small ones, were redevelopment sites. One was land on where the Subaru dealer was, where that new apartment was being put up, and there was another sale involved with that. And the other was the Montcalm redevelopment, which was a beverage hotel that was changed to condominium development. So we wouldn't have used those because the purchase sale was influenced by the project that was going to be done on those sites, and it doesn't represent the market because it's a change in value, a change in the highest and best use, which is the key here. We used what we call greenfield sales, which were non-development sales. Now, one of the ones in here came in at $179,000 an acre, and I know for a fact that number was not reliable, so I've just taken that out of our calculation. So the rest represent a range of $553,000 to $1,036,000, and they're on Sterling Lion and in Waverly West. Some ended up being multifamily, some ended up being shopping center, and there's a mix of them. And as far as the concept of land value, the RMFM zoning is equivalent to C2, and RMU is the equivalent of C2. All the C designations have an equivalency in RM zoning, and that equivalency is listed on my page 5. So what it basically means is that if you have an apartment you'd like to put up on C-zone lands, you follow the RM zoning that applies to it. Right now, the major demand in Winnipeg is for RM lands, not C lands. So taking that low sale out, that raises my average to 833,000. So I'm just amending my report on that basis, 833,000, which comes to a value of 2,898,840, rounded to 2,899. Remarkably close to what I believe the assessment department should have been brought forward, and that's my different method. Now, the only problem with this approach and both approaches is when anyone is considering vacant land, then they also have to include the cost of demolition and cleanup. There is a environmental registration on this site back when it was operated as a Ford dealership and due to waste oil. And as such, that has to be dealt with and considered in the valuation, which we have not done for this valuation because we were trying to be fairly principled. We did come to an agreement 8 years ago with the assessment department on the valuation procedure as a land. You have to subtract demolition, which is minimum $10 a foot. On dirty sites, $20 a foot. So that means $600,000 off the top cleanup, and then you get your land value. So I would request that the board consider a range of values between 3033 and 2899. Thank you very much.
Just repeat those numbers again, please.
3,033,000.
Yeah.
303 and 2,899,000.
Thank you.
Questions?
I do have some questions. So in regards to the cleanup costs, demolition costs, is that's an estimate, the $10 to $20?
Yes, that's correct. That's commonly what we found. Now, this is a brick building, so like the masonry side steel deck, so the masonry brings the price up. Now, if you had an asbestos in your building, you can guarantee $20 because you got to double bag everything for the dump. I don't believe there's any. I think our issue is ground contamination.
Okay.
And so the cost of cleanup is going to depend on the project being considered on top of it.
Okay, but none of that, like there's no numbers that...
No,
in the brief?
that's more correct. We have discussed it with the assessment department in the past, perhaps with an older relative of yours several years ago. I have here when we told him about it, but I guess he never told you, did he? That's fine, I'm just joking.
Another question just in regards to, I know you were saying you didn't agree with the mixed methodology of, I think that when you were looking at the land only rate, like the 2406, did you consider that applying that to the total 151 square feet?
No, and as I mentioned earlier, because your sales of the two larger sized parcels were changes in highest and best use, they were redevelopment plays, so the value would have been based on the highest and best use of a conversion to high density. In both cases, these ended up being high density multifamily. The one on 2525 ended up getting permission at council to exceed the CMU because it was going to be small units, supposedly for student housing, so very, very high density. So the value of commercial land for apartments is based on the number of permissible units.
Okay. And then in regards to the land comparables that you used, you were suggesting that these were purchased and then not developed?
No, these were all we're trying to look at what we call greenfield sites, because then they're not impacted by dealing with the change in highest and best use. And so Sterling, Lyon, and Waverly West were all considered greenfield in that they weren't dealing with a former use.
Okay. And would you agree that the V-res or the residential zoning of some of these properties would allow for different types of development, and potentially the C3 zoning of the subject property would allow for more commercial development than you would see on some of these residential.
Right, and I agree. Now, the zoning on these, L allows one apartment per 400 feet. Medium is FM is 800 feet of land per apartment, and S is 1,200 per apartment. RMU is 800 feet plus allowing commercial development. And the C4 lands that we had in here are shopping center zoning. So we had no C3 lands that we noted that were sold. Now C3, from our zoning document, you can see on page, let's see, most of the principal uses we were looking at would have been page 11 and forward. It's the typical tables. Yes. Office, retail, etc. So C2, C3, C4 have various restrictions, and C4 is actually not necessarily the most permissive because it doesn't allow certain things that's designated for shopping centers. And C3 is a skew towards automotive related, and C2 is medium-sized commercial, C1 is small-sized commercial. That's a real, informal way of describing it.
Right.
But then the equivalencies was what I was referring to on page 5. But how a zoning district can have different uses on it. So C1, C2 have the equivalency listed, C3 does not, C4 does not. But then there's another issue at stake here. We know, even though it's C3, it would get multifamily permission on this site because it's now in transit-oriented development catchment area. So transit-oriented development is a zoning overlay that is to encourage high-density multifamily on the rapid transit routes.
Okay, and so of the comparables here, which of these properties would allow for the same type of commercial development as the subject?
Well, I'm going to suggest that the RMU and FM and S and FL, I'd say virtually all of them because with the exception, see the two ones that are marked A, that was the zoning at time of sale, but it's now been changed to FS, the top one, and the bottom one, I believe, I can't recall what the zoning is on 1145. They're all going to allow, with the C4 won't allow,
C3.
no, but the C4 listed here in my thing won't allow multifamily. The subject would allow multifamily under the transit-oriented TOD, transit-oriented development issue. So, but other than that, the C3 is close to the C4.
No further questions.
Thank you. Stuart Brennan.
I think I heard you say that you reached an agreement in 2010 with land assessment.
That's correct.
I know you're under oath, but is there any documentation that would support that agreement?
I'm pretty sure I've got something here.
While Mr. Ruth was looking, can I redirect the question to the assessor, Madam Chair?
I'm sorry?
While he's doing that, may I?
Yes,
redirect it?
go ahead.
Are you aware, or were you aware, of land agreement on land value historically?
I'm not certain if, no, I'm not 100% certain. I know that in the past, the board has decided to do land-only value.
I'm talking about this property specifically.
Yeah, for this
You're talking
property.
about this?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for this particular property, they have made decisions where it was a land-only thing. But again, I would circle back to, if we were to look at this at land-only, the number would be higher than the recommendation that I'm putting forward today.
Understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, my first document I have is a 15-1 signed September 17th, 2009 to deal with the 2010 assessment, changing it to $2,400,000. Now, a 15-1 is not required to have this on, but I'm under oath. Land value was the reason for the decision. And I have a recommendation on the site from another year on land value.
Well, he's looking, I'll ask you another question.
Sure.
Yes, that's what I made. Would you use your $24.06 a square foot to calculate the land value, or how would you?
Yeah, that's exactly what we would
You would
use.
use
Yeah,
that
and so
number?
that would be applied to the overall 100 and...
That would come out higher than your record.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it amounts to rounded $3,640,000. And again, with the cost to make this a vacant property, I thought that the recommendation coming in a little lower was pretty reasonable.
Did you factor in the
Sorry.
numbers?
I was going to say it's actually questions for Mr. Neufeld.
May I redirect?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, sure.
Would you factor in $10 to $20 a square foot in that?
No,
Calculation?
yeah, no,
Not that high?
no. I don't think we would make any adjustment to what we're seeing from land rates. Like, we'd be looking at, if you were looking at this property and you were to demolish it, there would be development potential there, absolutely. So we would look at, like any of these land sales where there's development potential, obviously they're not buying it to just hold the land. I mean, some land speculators may do that, but typically you'd buy it and develop it. So no, we would just be looking at, on a per square foot basis, what is this type of land going for? There's a range. The model comes in at the low end. It seems pretty reasonable.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. McDonald.
Now I have two things in my head. Okay, I have this order, and apparently it was from 2008 that the agreement was made and the recommendation made to go to land value. And I wasn't working at Colliers, or somewhere else, so I don't have those files. But I'm absolutely 100% sure it was given. But I'm going to redirect to what the assessor just said.
Before you go there? Sorry.
Yes.
And the assessor has indicated that he was aware of an order or an arrangement. So
Okay.
I'm happy with that. Sorry.
Now, on the basis he answered the question, if we went to all land, we have $24 a foot. But wasn't that rate developed by your model?
It is, yeah.
And doesn't your model have to take into account size as well? Wasn't it based on a smaller area? Wouldn't your model generate a lower number for the larger area?
No. No, it would not. In this instance, the model, and so I reviewed this because what would happen typically is if the income value comes in lower than the land value would go out. Now, in this instance, the original value that went out was the income with the excess land component, so the income value went out. The mixed approach went out. But I did review the land only, so by switching our model just to the land,
Right.
you're looking at this $3,640,000. That's where the 2406 comes from.
But also your model doesn't account for demolition of an existing structure.
Correct.
And it doesn't account for any cleanup for impacted properties.
Correct.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, so your brief here states that it reverted to land value due to obsolescence. So obviously it's obsolete as a car dealership, but the condition of the building?
Poor.
Do you have any photos?
I have.
I've never been in this building, so I have no first-hand knowledge. Like, when's the last time you were in it?
Summer.
Okay, and so your general impression?
Well, nothing had been done to it since it was stopped its use as an auto dealership. And what they had done is taken the main floor showroom and converted it, or just put up racks, and they put their goods for sale on it. In the shop, they had used it as is, and it's open display for hockey-related items. Then you walk through the back, and the other service areas were for storage, as is from the original days. Now, there's one unit up front that is operated as a clothing store, again by a member of the family, and they left it as is with the existing improvements, and it's supposed to have sort of like an element of grunge. That's the best word I can think of.
When did this stop being a car dealership, do you know?
Sometime around 1999, I'm going to say, but I think the assessor mentioned the sale.
I know it's been a long time, and they have not done any improvements or updating to this building since that time?
No.
That's what I'm just trying to...
No, they're...
If we're basing this on the building being obsolete, then...
Well, it's
some evidence to that effect.
Clearly the motivation at the time of purchase was buy a piece of land and hope for some appreciation on land value and development, and in the interim earn some income on a use. The owner has at the time had three other sports shops around the city. Now they're down to 2. So they did have a concept for interim use, and then you can see with the rent of the lots there that they also have that. So they've had various users. The north lot has been at various times a used car dealer that they rented the land, and it's compounded. And then the south lot was to new car dealers just for compound storage and non-compound storage, I should say, because there's no fences on that part of it. And so, again, we have an interim use until such time as there's interest to sell it at a rate that's reasonable. Now, we brought buyers to this owner, and the problem with it has been, as discussed, demolition costs and dealing with the impacted registration.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Madam Chair, if you don't have a
Sure.
question. Yeah. So I find it very odd. I'm looking at page 12 of the city's evidence. It looks like something 2018 that an obsolete building in poor condition required $80,000 in electrical work.
Yes.
Do you know what that's about?
Yeah, that was just code upgrades and repairs. They were using the original panels from the auto dealer, and the change to retail is actually a higher lighting requirement. And the higher lighting means that you don't just run a new line; you actually have to put in new panels. But you're drawing less power, but you have more outlets.
So contrary to your statement that improvements have been made to the
Well,
property
no.
in the last 2 years.
Code.
Well,
Business owners don't consider code to be an improvement. It doesn't let them earn more money. It's simply a cost they can't recover.
well, it allows them to earn more money, sir, because
It allows them to
they would be
keep,
shut down if they didn't make those improvements.
it
So
allows them to keep their building on the market.
you've answered my question. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld, quick question. You mentioned this building was sitting on contaminated land from the previous tenant. Do you have evidence? Do you have a listing?
A registration number?
Yeah.
I can get it.
No, that's okay. You're under oath. Just wanted to know if you had it.
I was just looking through my previous submissions to see if I have a number here. Sorry, I don't know if you're aware, but the Manitoba Environment Conservation has changed their methodology of registering impacted sites. So we have a new database. It was actually October 9th, 2019 was the issue. So they have changed this registration.
Okay.
But I've seen
Fine.
the tag area.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to 80 Sherbrooke Street.
Okay, file number 19-4506, the roll number 1209-0503-800, and the address is 80 Sherbrooke Street. The owner is 7463601 Manitoba Limited. Roll year under appeal 2020 with a reference date of April 1st of 2018. The assessed value under appeal $3,183,000. Class code 60 property and taxable. We have 4 building records on file for this particular property with 19 premises and a mix of 1 to 2 stories. The range in actual year built varies between 1972 and 1984 with no effective ages applied to the buildings. The land area 29,712 square feet and the gross floor area of the buildings 48,637 square feet with a total leasable area of 34,627 square feet. If you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to our 2017 request for information as well as our 2017 sales mailer. And you'll notice that the subject property has sold fairly recently, February 6th of 2017 for $4 million with a sworn value of $4 million. The subject property leases are shown at the bottom of page 2. They vary between $5.67 a square foot upwards to $12.12 a square foot. If you flip to page 3, you'll see the rental comparables that I used for this particular property. Tried to use retail store rents that were located in the same area or close to the subject property with a couple exceptions. You're looking at a range here between $7.63 a square foot, that's on Westminster, all the way up to $23.27 a square foot at 156 Sherbrooke. As well, there's 70 Sherbrooke, it's very close to the subject property, $17.24. So this is what I was looking at in regards to market rental information. You flip to page 4, you'll see how the model has applied rents to this particular property for the various premises. Again, there is a range here in the modeled rents from as low as $4.80, that's for area that's tagged as storage, all the way up to $14.78 for one of the smaller C2 retail units. So considering the actual leases that are in place for this property and considering the rental comparables, I think the model is fairly reasonable in the rents that are applied. If you flip to page 5, you'll see the rest of that income workup. So the potential rent there, $325,588. Vacancy at 6%. And for expenses, for non-recoverable expenses, 2%. And shortfall at $650 a square foot. The net operating income here, $286,427. The cap rate that's applied by the model is 9% for a capitalized value rounded at $3,183,000. Again, lower than what the sale price would suggest for this property. Page 7, you'll see some photos, a map view of the property. It's located right on Sherbrooke. There's a variety of retail units on the main level, and like I said, there's a mix of 1 to 2 story buildings that are kind of mix-mashed together. Page 8, you'll see some more photos of the subject property into page 9. You see the street view to the opposite end of the building that you see on page 8. Page 10 is the income and expense questionnaire as filled out by the owner on our online portal for the income and expense questionnaires. That goes through to page 12. Page 12 is the property sale questionnaire. So again here they show a few things. Is the consideration paid shown above the correct total sales price? Yes. And again, the consideration paid $4 million, sworn value $4 million. On what date was the sale price agreed upon? Looks like November 16th, 2016. Was this an arm's length open market transaction? Yes. No other items included in the purchase price. They don't indicate any appraisal being done. There's no leaseback arrangements. It's a full sale interest. So this is something that typically we would look at and use for analysis for sales. They indicate a mix of retail and office space. They're intending the same usage, and they indicate that the condition overall is fair for the property. They are not indicating any repairs needing to be done or intent to repair, and no intent to demolish any of the structures or subdivide any of the property. 13 is the remainder of the sales questionnaire with some redacted information in regards to the mortgages, just out of respect for the owners. Page 14 and 15 is actually what was attached to the sales mailer. So actually at the bottom of page 13 they indicate that was there any financial details and or investment prospectus available prior to the conclusion of the sale? They indicate yes, and they say attached. So this is on page 14 and 15, this is what they were looking at when they made that decision to purchase the property. And it looks like it's just January through December of 2015, and then showing the percentage change over the previous year. Page 16 is cap rate information. Page 17 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and again the addenda package attached to the back. That is the end of my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
I have a question here. You have a sale that you're reporting. Okay, sorry, no, I'm just trying to match up the date here, and I misread that. The sale, you're saying, was February 2017, and your response was provided July 20th, 2017.
Correct.
Okay. Now, on that document, did you notice line 10, that's on page 12?
Yes, so they did occupy the property prior to purchasing.
And question number 11, intended to occupy after the sale?
Yep.
Your evaluation, page 5, is this all by the model?
Yep.
You made a statement that considering the actual rents, the model was supported, reliable. I missed your word.
I would say that the model comes in fairly reasonable considering the actual rents.
Fairly reasonable.
And considering the market rental evidence as well. It's both, right?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Now, on that basis, the model was at 6%, and their claim on their information was believe, 9%. Page 10, 9.4%.
In regards to,
Just a vacancy.
vacancy, yep,
Okay.
they indicate 9.4.
And the potential rent of the model on page 6 is $325,000, and their potential rent is $222,000 plus $4,800 for parking.
Yes, it appears that way. With
So-
some recoveries, yep.
So that's about $100,000, $95,000 difference between the model and their actual potential rent.
Correct.
And I understand that they've included some bank charges and amortization, which we know, of course, don't belong. But their net operating income is $28,000. And when you reverse those charges, I have an NOI of $164,311. You dispute that that's what they're claiming on page 10?
You've just removed the bank interest and the amortization?
That's correct.
I wouldn't dispute it.
Okay. And your NOI at a 6% vacancy is $286,000.
Correct.
So we're about $120,000 apart. So, wouldn't that indicate that their actuals, that the model is not reasonable? It's a fairly large gap, it's a 50% gap.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that that the model is being unreasonable in the rents that are applied. I think you have to look at both the rents in place and also to the market, right?
Well,
And there's a range there. And
But your statement was considering the actual rents, the model is fairly reasonable. Do you still stick by that statement?
this original statement was that in conjunction with the market evidence as well. You have to consider both.
All right.
Yeah.
But it is not consistent, the model is not consistent with the actual, just on those two factors.
With this statement here, there is a difference there, absolutely.
Were you inspected?
I did not inspect this property.
Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. There's another one. Was this appealed last year?
I'm not too certain. I don't have it jotted down in my notes, but I can't.
Okay, I was just looking at you to cover me, because I can't find my file from last year.
I usually write it down in my notes. In this instance, I didn't. I can't tell you for certain. I don't have the information.
That's fine.
Sorry, that's fine, then, that's all I have to say.
Mr. Whitford,
No
questions?
So on page 2 of your brief, those are actual rents from the property.
Yeah, so when the owner fills out the online income and expense questionnaire, there also is like a tenant verification section where they put their tenants, they put what the rents are that are in place, the lease term, that sort of stuff. And that's the information that you're seeing there is generated from that system.
Does that add up to the entire space?
I don't believe so.
No.
Not from what I can see, and obviously there is some vacancy there, and the model does apply.
Vacancy or owner occupied?
Potentially, yeah, potentially.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. I have no questions. Mr. Newfeld, if you'd like to give us your brief?
I have a little bit of rebuttal information, and some of it's repetitive.
Okay,
I'm
I'm going to ask you to give us your brief first, though, please.
Really? Is that how you want it? I
Yeah.
mean, because
Yeah.
just other people
Yeah.
say to do it differently.
No, I just want to hear your brief first.
I don't have a problem with
Then
that.
you can throw the rebuttal.
I don't have a problem with that, if you can set the rules. All right, I'm just gonna leave it here for Kara in case she's, knows that she's got, just leave me a copy, there's a few extras. The first thing to deal with is the subject sale, and since I haven't handed out the rebuttal, it's quite clear in the rebuttal that it should never have been relied upon. The owner was actually my ex-accountant, and Bill, and he sold the building to a tenant, and the tenant was motivated, he wanted to expand his operation, he's the pharmacist. So they declared that. They're not experts in valuation. The issue with problems like that, and I can at least read from this, even though you're eventually going to see it, is that definition of market value excludes properties where unaffected, that it has to be for a property unaffected by special or creative financing or sales concessions granted by anyone associated with the sale. In that basis, and again, having been knowledgeable about the sale, I would never have used this for either a sale or a cap rate. It was just overly motivated. The property was not appealed in the last assessment to the municipal board because there was a penalty request, and at the board of revision, the penalty was denied, and quite frankly, did not dare to tempt fate. The no penalty this year, everything's been resolved, but that's why we didn't proceed with it further last cycle. The income as presented was done, and you have several statements that the assessor provided as well as the online version, and I've just been quickly going over them, and they don't disagree. The actual NOI for the building with the pharmacy as a tenant, a 9.4% vacancy, was $163,000, and that included vacancy of 9.4%, non-recoverables, costs, everything, $163,000. Now the difference that we're doing is we looked at the revenue and we backed the 9.5% back in, because we knew that after sale that the pharmacist took more space, and therefore that part of the sale couldn't be relied on. We had to go to a market-based vacancy. Now the assessor's at 6%, we're at 6.5%, minor difference, but it's important to understand why we do this. Since the failure of the model, we have reverted back to normal practices, and the best information for practitioners in our business is the Johnson report. Here is the report here, and they have different reports on different vacancy types, office and retail for one. Not only do we have this broken down by use, but we have it broken down by area, and we can also look for anomalies in the area. And the biggest one, for example, in retail has been when a big shopping center loses an anchor tenant and how it throws off the rates for that particular submarket. So what we do as part of our investigation is we look at three factors: the actual vacancy, a retail vacancy as would be expected in this area, and then overall, and then looked at the central region where this is located. So we've adjusted it down to 6.5% to deal with market-based factors affecting the actual. On the issue of the non-recoverables, there's very clear evidence of what these are for the owner. When one backs out the revenue and treats it as full, there is still a non-recoverable cost of $36,942, and that is evident on the statements. So that has been included as a non-recoverable. They would be insurance, professional fees, supplies, and caretaker. The concept of other costs, which the assessor used to call 2%, we're using a structural reserve, and what we've done is base this on 25 cents a square foot for the building. Two ways of dealing with structural reserve. is, one is per square foot, the other is percentage of income. The smaller the building, the less it is out of the investment category, the more you would steer towards a rate per square foot. The most typical cost would be roof replacement, and in the case of this property, what we're dealing with is a plan area of 20,000 feet, which means that the roof is that big, so the roof would cost, when it has to be replaced, approximately $350,000 to $400,000. It has to be done, a roofer would tell you every 20 years, but most people are from 35 to 40 years, so that's a typical cost. And an allocation of $9,000 a year is a fair amount to put aside for structural repair. It can also be used to deal with HVAC replacement where those costs are not recovered from the tenant. And this is a standard deduction from any appraisal. Our shortfall was based on the actual calculation of $897 a square foot, and the numbers are done below. Now, the only variance we made from the actuals was we're using for utilities $235 a square foot, which is a number that the city business tax uses. And the reasons for doing it are that vacant buildings could have lower utilities, could have higher, and an individual user could be drawing higher utilities. So a standardized rate that we thought was fair. So that gets us to $897 a square foot for the shortfall. So our restructured NOI is 185082. We put a cap on it of 9.5 based on issues like the location. We looked at the assessor's rate of 9% and don't find that that is disagreeable. So rather than make a debate of the cap, we're content to change that to 9%. So that's a small change in value. Which is $2,056,467, 2,056,467, rounded to $2,056,000. Now, lest you take my remarks as being self-serving or protective or whatever you want to call it, to look at last year's assessment, it's a real problem in Winnipeg. The fear of this penalty. We don't subject our owners to it voluntarily when we find that the penalty request has been made. We avoid it as well as we can because it's been applied for so many different reasons. We were not applied the penalty at Board of Revision, and I talked it over with the owner and I said, look, I think you got a good case for a lower value. We're going to take it to the municipal board, and then you're going to make the request for penalty. And nobody likes the inconsistencies in the request for application or the risk associated with it. It's the most draconian penalty for this Canada. And we practice across Canada. We know that it is, so we avoid it. And that's the presentation, and I do have still rebuttal.
Thank you.
Just a few questions. I know you were looking at the income and expense information on my page 10. So they do indicate partially owner-occupied, correct? So the space that the owner occupies would not be...
You'll note that in your workup that the lease was put in place a month before the sale, so it would reflect that income.
The owner-occupied space is reflected in here, is what you're suggesting?
On your page, your page 11, you'll note that the item for South Sherbrooke Health Center and Pharmacy, who are the new owners, was for a lease start January 1st, 2017. The sale occurred February 2017, so the income is in it.
Okay. And then just one further question about the income and expense questionnaire. You had indicated some items that were included in the non-recoverables. Which items were those?
Oh, for calculating of 36,000?
Yeah.
Somehow I knew you were going to ask that. I don't have my notes here on that. Well, when you start with the potential rent, so this is a rent that's impacted by a 9.4% vacancy, and when, okay, let me see if I can work this out.
The question mostly was just, is there specific line items in the expense that would typically be non-recovered? Like what adds up to that 36,000 from the?
Right. No, I know what you're asking. I want to see where the math came from, and I believe I know. Okay, so on page 1, you'll note that at the bottom,
Is it your page one?
my page 1, we list expenses at $200,751,
Okay.
and the recoveries are listed a bit to the left and higher at $137,498. So I just double checked the numbers. So we have a shortfall between recoveries and expenses of approximately $63,000.
And a portion would that be for the owners?
A portion would be shortfall,
Right.
right? And so the shortfall, so you start with the 63,000, and once one takes off the shortfall of that, in which case we had applied 21,405, but the actual shortfall was based on 9%, not 6%.
Okay.
So then that would takes us to 36,000 on the calculation.
Okay. No further questions.
Mr. Whitmer?
Questions?
I have no questions.
And I have extra copies I gave you, didn't I?
You only sent to us.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I'm not giving you those from yesterday. It's Trevor's problems.
Okay.
I got extras for today for your file, in case we refer to this information.
For future files, not the first one.
Today, yeah. There's 2 documents here, and I know most of you heard this, and there have been a few revisions. My last revision was made for yesterday morning's hearing. No one sat on yesterday morning's hearing except Tara. So there have...
But I'm going to stop you right there, because I know yesterday's hearing went for hours.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with this. Don't worry about that. Those were special factors. Sometimes my friends and I at the assessment department have lengthy arguments. Sometimes my friends and I don't argue a lot. And I'm overall my concern is I have to provide for my clients the appropriate level of due diligence. Okay, so this one, quickly, this is a broker's statement. Brokers apply 7%. Appraisal Institute, appraisers apply management expense recovery rates or non-recovery rates in calculation. And page 4, IAAO say apply those rates. Do it from sales information. Incidentally, we have the sales information in the assessor's brief, and if one were to go through the non-recoveries and wonder how did this not make my statement, that's rather strange. Now here's the new evidence on page 5. And there are several people I'm hoping are dealing with this. And in all fairness to Mark, I've never seen an issue with his work, but we've come across 4 reported cases, all listed with the address, where one of these mailers, like this style, which is a computer, internet-provided amount, were provided to the assessment department. We had copies of what was provided. We went back into their system under the My Properties and got new copies just to see that it was as shown. Then when the assessor came to hearing, they presented their evidence like this, but it had line items removed, non-recoverable line items removed. And I have listed those costs, non-recoverables that were removed from statements presented to the panel as evidence. Notwithstanding the issue of altering evidence, the concern here is that these numbers, non-recoverables, submitted by property owners never made it into the system, according to one assessor's testimony, that they were deleted by the modelers and not considered. Now, I'm not going to say what happened because we don't yet know what happened, but we know one thing. When you alter evidence, you impact the reliability of what you submitted.
So, Mr. Neufeld, are you suggesting that this happened today, in today's briefs, that something was omitted?
No, I'm saying the model, yes, something was omitted in today's brief, not by this assessor, but by the model he has presented to you. Because other evidence provided to this board has stated that the city disagreed with financial information and removed the line item. Amount deleted was $44,000 in non-recoverable costs. That was on the record.
Which property are you dealing with?
I was just reading 1345 Redwood on this page. So now today the assessor is bringing forward a position that we've dealt with these non-recoverables. Now we don't know how. We do know that so far on these occasions I've listed that they were removed from consideration because they disagreed with them. They don't have the right to disagree with them. They can't make a model if they disagree with them. They presented this board, and I'm not saying this assessor because at all, so don't get worried about it. I'm not talking about you. I'm saying that they have complete disrespect for the taxpayers and the board, that they can present this information to you and say our model generated this, but by the way, we didn't tell you that we took stuff out of our model. How do you do that? Where's the transparency? Now, if they had said to you, oh, by the way, here's our brief, and we don't like these items here, and we highlight them, that's fair ball. Because then at least it allows us to challenge, and we're transparent. And many assessors do that. And I believe I got this from you, is Mr. Assessor, and you did this. So this is appropriate. What was done here is not. Now we don't know the models. Another interesting statement made was an admission that most people who fill these out don't even know how to do it, which we all know to be true. So if you don't know how to do it, and data going in isn't great, and then it's changed arbitrarily by somebody else, the model is not reliable. Now this will continue to develop. Now I didn't go looking for these, by the way. I didn't go, hey, let me go check every one and look for a problem. These have just started coming up. And when we get around to spending some time on them, we will start reviewing them. But in the absence of proof and transparency, I think we have to take a serious look at the model, and anytime it's hidden behind and somebody challenges it, let's go back to the municipal board, and what does it say? The burden of proof is on the assessor. This completely fails the burden of proof. Completely. You can't adjust failure. Failure is zero. It's not, let's grade it on the curve. Failure is zero. So we are dealing with the failure and the burden of proof. And until such time as, well actually, it's just out. We can't rely on it. And we haven't had a response from the assessor on this either. And you know, a response can't be, well, we just did it a couple of times, or we just, in this case, it was different, or, you know, it's not a big deal. Those aren't adequate responses. I know we're going to get them. When you make an alteration on evidence and present it to a board, it's a serious, serious offense. For the board's consideration is, I'm not asking to convict them, but to try and convict them. I'm asking you to throw out the model.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to questions now.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not
Mr.
finished.
Newfeld?
Sorry, I'm not finished. Now, I'm not,
Mr. Newfeld, the board has heard the 5% ad nauseum.
don't care. And I really don't care. I'm demanding my right to be heard, because I concur that you've heard many of these things before. I have the right to repeat them. I'm not going to repeat anything that I'm not concerned about specifically for these properties. But I am going to repeat what I am specifically concerned about for the properties today.
Okay. I'm going to ask, though, that you keep brevity in mind.
No problem.
Thank you.
On page, the second thing I handed out, page 1 and 2, this is from the IAAO. And what this shows are the assessor is saying in his brief that I know the city of Winnipeg follows the IAAO. The IAAO says which sales should not be relied on, leasebacks. Which is what we're dealing with the property at 80 Sherbrooke. So it doesn't make a cut as far as being included in a ratio study or mass appraisal. Now, oftentimes, when one gets one of these properties, if there's enough due diligence and time, you can go back and review them and see if you can work with the site. In this case, I've done that, and I know we can't. That's my side of it, but the assessor hasn't done it at all. The assessor has already admitted that there were some cap rates here that he's not relying on, and cap rates aren't a source of this dispute. Page 7 is what I had read earlier in regard to the definitions on market value. The Manitoba doesn't have any sort of rates that are applied by law. They are referred to market value at all times. Here are the appropriate definitions. The subject sale considered creative financing. Those were the ones I was referring to. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
So I had the good fortune to sit through the presentation by Mr. Newfeld. I think it was on 889 wall where there was a 6780
Right, that's
elimination from the document, from the evidence, submitted by the city. And while he was presenting, I was able to go through and do the calculations and discover that even though the line item was taken out, the number 6780, that's the number 2 sample he's given us, was still calculated in the number crunching. So it was in there. And maybe you could just reference back to your explanation of how that's important or not important as to felt. So just let me finish. So I need to get this clear in my mind because I haven't had time to do the calculations on the other three properties because I don't have the evidence for them. So if you look at this column, that 6780 had been, I guess, obliterated or not put in to the computer model. And yet the number was still calculated in the actual calculations to come up with the bottom line net operating income here. So that's something for us to remark on. I wonder, and maybe you can confirm this, would we find the same thing on the other three examples?
Absolutely not. In the other examples, the number at the bottom was also mathematically changed by the formula of the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, so
in those it was, and if you recall at 889 Wall, our assessor who had worked in the modeling department had indicated that they were looking at particular line items for their calculations, not the total value. So I'm thinking that that was an admission that it may have been missed in the model.
but according to your statement just now, you couldn't miss it in the model because it's an Excel spreadsheet and it would factor that in.
Right, yeah. And that's, again, all goes back to the concept of transparency and rules of evidence. We're speculating, I'm speculating, you're speculating. We only know one thing. Somebody took it out.
They took that line item out, but not the calculation.
Right, but they altered evidence to present to the board.
I hear you totally on that, and that's your case.
If we were making a point at a hearing to say we have non-recoverable expenses, then this would say, oh, no, you don't. This doesn't say so here. You didn't submit it. You know,
Can I just, before you go on, can I ask you a question, Mr. Nicole? With this 36,000 that you're talking about on non-recoverables, should that have shown up in this line somewhere? Is that a point you're making?
I calculated it out, and I manually calculated it out from the data. I don't know how the city's model works to find these things. And that's the other point I'm making. We don't know how it's done. Can we see it? You know, can we see how the model works? Can we see how the data goes in? Can you show us an example? We're not opposed to anything of that nature, and I think if you recall at that same hearing, it may have been that same hearing, one of the properties under review only had a non-recoverable of $272. And I was content.
That wasn't the same.
Wasn't it? Okay, I was content to put that in the non-recoverable line, because that's an actual.
I don't think you answered my question
No.
about $36,000
Would it pick it up?
on this
I don't-
case on Sherbrooke.
Yeah, I don't know if the model would pick it up. I picked it up.
You picked up that the line item is missing.
I picked it up from a read of the shortfall between recovered expenses and actual expenses, and then compared it to, part of it was due to a shortfall, and part of it was due to non-recoverables.
So if I went through this calculation as I did with the Wall Street property, would I find that the 36,000 was actually calculated in the net operating income as we see it here?
Well, what
Or do you
you
know
would-
for sure it wasn't?
On a line item basis, you would find that there are $200,000 in actual expenses, and recoveries were 137,498, which I've listed here. And then you would see that we got to our calculation of 36,000 by subtracting from that works out to 63,000, and then I see there's another number here, recoveries for vacant space, which was 26,311, and our shortfall is 21,405. So the shortfall has to take that into account. So I'm looking at the math here. I don't know how exactly it got to 36,000. I think my calculation on it would be.
You went through that a little bit ago.
My
In this hearing.
Oh no, this is correct. Okay, I see what happened here. 26,311 If you compare it to our shortfall at 21,405,
Where are you looking, sorry?
on my page 1,
No.
so in the adjusted vacancy rate of 6.5%, a shortfall would only be 21,405. However, if the 9.4 were put in, which is what was actually happening, that shortfall rate would be 26,311. So you can't double dip. Sure, you got shortfall and you got non-recoverables. So the 63,000 that's short on recovery, 26,000 of that would have gone to the shortfall. And the balance, which is 37,000, goes to non-recoverables. And we had 36,942, obviously I'm rounding.
Yeah.
So that's how the calculation was made. I like this calculation. We've been working on it a long time. Not me, but I see how our people did it.
So my point, the day we did Wall, and it would be my point again today, given we only have 4 examples of this, is in your mind, could this possibly be an error by somebody who is doing the transposition and they simply eliminated that? And yet the calculation stayed in the formula and was processed.
I think that that's an assertion that they're required to put forward, not us.
Your assertion is it was deliberately
No,
eliminated?
I'm worried that it's deliberate. My assertion is there are alterations in evidence. What do you do when you see an alteration in evidence? How does our country treat this?
Well, you say 2 lines had been removed from information supplied by the owner.
That's correct.
So that talks to me that deliberate removal.
In the 2 other cases, the assessor admitted that he was aware that it had been removed because they disagreed with him. In the Wall one, you heard the assessor's testimony. She knew no reason why it was done, had no knowledge at all. In the other 2, the assessor admitted he had known why it was removed. He didn't like it.
I'll let it go from here. I think we're going to hear more on this topic, obviously. But I wanted to make clear that the board understood that those numbers did go through the calculations.
Right. In our Canadian justice system, if the prosecutor of any case, even these tribunals, uses evidence that's faulty, it can't be relied on.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions?
So, you're putting this in front of us to say that what's coming out of the model may not be reliable because there's information that may be missing, that it's not related to this specific property today. I mean, it could be, I understand what you're saying.
Well, they've applied the model.
Yeah,
They've
I know, I understand, but that's what I'm just
testified
saying, there's nothing, yeah, okay, that's...
No, but no, I have not noted any
Yes,
errors
thank you,
in this.
okay, that's all I heard, thanks.
And I have no questions. And I think we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Sure.
Call this hearing back to order, and we are going to move on to 836 Sergeant Avenue.
So we do have the preliminary issue of the non-compliance that we're seeking in regards to this property. I can run you guys through.
Prior to that, can you refresh my memory, because I know you've made a request, a recommendation, but are you going to your second recommendation on value? Because I thought you gave us a different number.
I did. I would be willing to go to that number. I don't have the workup with me.
Okay.
Okay, let's just have Mark go through the non-co-op.
Well, because we're not going to contest it. And
I
so
know.
if he's going to provide the second number,
Yeah.
and then we can let this matter go through as a recommendation, and if you have
Yes.
that number.
But he still has to go through the preliminary quick.
It's just trying to be quicker.
I know you were, I know.
The main thing here is that we've included the income and expense letter that was sent out along with the blank mailer with its unique barcode. And we do show the Canada Post tracking information with the registered mail to show that someone...
We're waiting.
Oh, you're accepting the...
Yes.
He's
Oh, okay.
accepting it.
Perfect. So in regards to the recommendation, the original rec was for 256. I did speak with Ayrton Neufeld in the lead up to this. We were looking at a revision to $25 a square foot on the rent. And I believe the final figure was $225. I don't have the full workup, but does that match what your records were
It
showing?
was something like that, yes.
And you're basing that on 680 square feet?
Correct.
Mr. Neufeld, are you in agreement with this recommendation of $225,000?
Yes, I am, and we don't have any information on the penalty, so I have put it to the owner, and I haven't received a response. So, you know, don't anticipate one. If anything changes, I'll let you know.
Mr. Whitburn, did you have any questions on this property?
No, I think it's good.
I have no questions.
I have no questions. We'll move on to 925 Gordon.
Sure. File number 19-4551. The roll number 1202-3044-100. The address 925 Gordon Avenue. The roll year 2020 with the reference date of April 1st, 2018. And the assessed value under appeal $439,000. Classification is class code 60, taxable. And we have this parcel use tagged as a commercial retail store. 4 building records for this particular property, 2 premises, 1 story, and actual year built ranging between 1959 and 1981 with no effective ages applied to the actual year built. C2 zoning, 6,031 square feet of land area. And we have a gross floor area here of 3,650 square feet and a leasable area of 3,254 square feet. Page 2, you'll see that the owners responded to both requests for our income and expense questionnaires. No subject sale history and no subject property leases are shown on file. Page 3 is the rental comparables that I used. Now, a lot of these properties are retail properties along Gordon, with the exception of a couple that were from Academy. And there is a range here, the low end of the range being $14 and the high end of the range being $23.10. Page 4 of the brief, you'll see the income approach as applied by the model. 2,300 square feet of leasable area, that's the main floor premise at $14.71 a square foot. We have substandard basement premise, 954 square feet at $2.96 a square foot. The potential rent here, $36,657. We've applied 6% vacancy, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $650 a square foot for a net operating income of $32,500. The cap rate applied is 7.4 for a capitalized rounded value at $439,000. Page 5 is a summary of that income valuation. Page 6 is a map view of the property. It's an interior lot located directly on Gordon Avenue. Page 7 is an aerial photo. You can see that there's looks like there's a few roof lines there that suggest that maybe there were some additions to the original building, which is why we have multiple building records. Page 8 is some photos, aerial and street view of the subject property, the front and the back. It's currently occupied by Academy Forest, and it's my understanding that they use both the main floor and the basement. Page 9 through 11 is, or 12 is the income and expense questionnaire along with the tenant verification form. This is the information as submitted by the owner. Cap rate evidence, again, I've covered. We don't show the commercial retail store range there, and the addendum package as attached to all of the briefs that we've been submitting. That is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Newcomb, questions?
One second, if you don't mind. On your questionnaire, aren't you missing a page here?
One, two. Like you're referring to the cover letter?
No, page, in my information, page 3.
Yeah, it does appear that way. Well, we have the same page,
Yeah.
but we have different information on it.
No, it's
Oh,
another.
this is 929. You've got the wrong address here on yours.
No, I don't.
Or they're submitted together? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, if you look on your.
Oh, it says with 929.
Right.
Right, yeah, you're correct. There, I should have pulled the second mailer.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's one mailer, you would add 2 copies of it. They're separate rent roll, but shared costs.
Separate roll number.
2 roll numbers.
So that would be, yeah. Basically what is in here is the income and expense information for this particular roll number.
Yeah, okay.
But it looks like it's, yeah, mixed.
You know, you happen to have that by any chance?
I don't have it with me, no. I'm looking at it through your evidence here.
Okay.
That's a mistake on my part.
Wow. Now, so did you even have a chance to review the actual rent?
No, I'm referring to this page
Okay.
here for
Oh, okay.
925.
All right.
And it looks like, yeah, your Academy Forest is, the other comment I would make in regards to this, when we see multiple rolls submitted, sometimes they do seek penalties in regards to multi-roll submissions, when it's hard to distinguish income and expense information for 2 different properties. But I seem to have overlooked that in this instance, so we're not going to be seeking anything.
And here I throw myself at your mercy.
So I'm just a little bit confused, Madam Chairman. This page 11 from the city doesn't apply to this property. Is that what we're hearing? Mr.
Yes.
Gentleman?
It's
11 does not
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
looks like-
It applies to the property next door.
Next door,
Yeah.
929 40.
Right.
Which it looks like the owner just flopped
This
the,
is just, yeah.
yeah, they filled out the
Or maybe you
opposite
did.
forms. Well, this is submitted by the owner.
Well, you know, but on that, and I'm not making any issue of this, but this form, for example, page 9, that's not what they submitted, is it? There's a statement at the top that somebody covered up.
Yes, it does look like there was a sticker placed over something that was written at the top of the page.
Okay. Now, is it your contention that the basement is rented?
It's my understanding that we have the floors licensed in for the basement area. So typically, we would license them in when they're using the space. Otherwise, we'd leave it as vacant space.
Having seen that the lease information that was provided to the assessment department indicates no revenue for the basement accessory space, would that change your opinion of that?
No, I don't think so. I think we would still typically apply rent to the basement space. It may be, in this instance, a toss-in for the main floor, but we would still look at a market rent to apply.
Have you inspected it?
I did not inspect
Is
this.
it separately demised to your knowledge?
I'm not certain.
Does it have its own restrooms to your
I'm
knowledge?
not certain, no.
Can it be separately leased?
Without inspecting the property, it's hard for me to say.
And page 4, is this all done by your model?
Page 4 of my brief. Correct. Yeah, that's model driven.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitcomb.
So you haven't been there to
No, I haven't.
determine what shape this basement is in, but you still determine there could be a market value to that space.
Yeah, so when there are two distinct tenant classes that we can apply to basement space. One is more, like the one is the substandard, which is what we were dealing with today. But there also is, I believe, a C9 tenant class that we can apply that would generate a bit higher of a rent for the basement space. And what that is like fully fitted out for retail purposes. So in this instance, it's the substandard rates that are being applied.
Thank you for that question.
No, I think that my question's been answered, thank you.
So you had stated that you did not inspect this
I
property.
did not inspect it.
Do you know the last time it was inspected?
No, I don't have that information with me.
Would you happen to know the ceiling height in the basement?
No.
So it's got an actual age of 59 and effective of 81.
No, so there's multiple buildings here, so what I suspect is there was an addition, and the addition was put on in 81. So that's why you're seeing two different sets of ages. There's no effective age applied to either of the buildings for this particular property.
So just looking at your page 8 then, you've got a little part at the front. It's got the arches with the name. I'm looking at the top aerial photo.
Yep.
So could that possibly be the 1959 portion and the 1981 portion is in the rear?
Yeah, and it may be that way. When I looked at, and we have some old photos from the assessors from back in the 70s and 80s, it looked like the front portion was still there, so I suspect that it's the back portion. But because I haven't been there to check it out myself, just haven't had the time, it's hard to fully make that distinction.
So I'm going to say that the basement would probably most likely be in the 1959 portion. Correct?
Yeah, I would
Given the size?
probably. It's hard, again, hard for me to answer with.
Right. Because you didn't inspect it.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Newfeld?
Thank you. This building is not joined to the neighboring building, but they've been owned by the same party for as long as I've been alive. The owner's offices are actually next door in the basement of the building at 929, and for at least 60 years they've operated these properties as one economic unit. So when they submitted to their income and expense questionnaires, we went over the requirements clearly with them and said, you must submit what's under your care and control. If you break up a cost that you do not have in your books, you would be providing misleading information. Because the penalty is such a scary prospect, it doesn't matter what you do, someone's going to come looking for it. Not Mark, but somebody. So what they've done is supplied the information which I've provided in my document here. Page 3 is the gross rent roll for the subject building, and page 4 are the expenses and gross rent roll for the building next door. And these are the two that the assessor has provided. What they show is that on page 3 is that the gross income coming out of the subject property is $51,000. That's done by taking the $3,250 a month in rent times 12. That's $39,000 plus $12,000 in recoveries, non-specified recoveries, $51,000. Then on page 4 are the expenses for both, and they have been provided this way because to do so any other way would be misleading. And that is the problem we have with the, one of the problems that's with the penalty is that it doesn't take into account a building management that has been going on for 60 years. And in the case of this owner, they've owned major portions of Corridon for over 100 years. So I would suggest that they've been there longer, their statements count more than the city's desire to have a statement. The information on page 4 shows total expenses $69,228 per year. There are a total of 7,757 square feet for both properties. That indicates expenses of $892 a square foot. The subject's portion of that is $20,528. What I'm getting at is our calculation is incorrect. The actual net income is $30,473.
Sorry, can you say that again?
30473.
What's the NOI?
Well, the NOI is going to change because you would apply the vacancy of 1447, and I would apply the shortfall of 969. I would not apply the non-recoverables because we're dealing with the gross lease, because you've already accounted for them. To do so with double dip, and it would include structural reserve. I don't know if I can use the shortfall because I think it was calculated wrong. So for sake of if you're worried about something, I'm not going to apply it. So my NOI then changes to 28,557. 28,557. Now the cap rate we've applied at 8.5%, which comes to a value of 335,967, rounded to 336,000. Now last year's assessment was 337,000. That was a recommendation by an assessor. The original cap rate was 8%, and original NOI was 32.5. And she never gave me an explanation of why it was changed, but did make a recommendation of 337,000, which we accepted. The number, what we're looking for this year is about the same, because like the property market, nothing has really changed. A point about market, the common error people make is they say the market's improved every year. It has not improved on same site. It's improved if you put a new property in the market, you're going to get more rent than the old one. The more new product there is, it drives up average rates. But existing properties aren't getting better rates. And we do have a number of cap rate comparables in our document. We would start first on page 25, and this is our Collier's cap rate model, and this subject property does not belong in here. It's inferior. It's miscellaneous retail. We don't track miscellaneous retail.
However, one of the things to point out is we mark under this trend. Trend means, are we going up or down? Flat, 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 flat. No changes. That's how we track. Now, we have a number of capitalization rate examples on pages 35 and 36, and these are generally superior to the subject in terms of what this is, miscellaneous retail. And the ones I presented range from a low of 7.93% to a realistic high of 9.47%. And I think the 8.5% falls into the range on the basis of this. Incidentally, if you were to do a calculation of the assessor's NOI and you deleted the basement, which isn't even on the rent roll, you'd probably find that your NOI and his and our NOI would be very, very similar. So it's not rentable space. It's included in the lease as accessory space. And then our only difference would be capitalization rate. As a miscellaneous retail building, it would not attract an investment grade capitalization rate. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions?
Just one question. Do you know if the florist uses the basement?
I get confused because there's another one. Okay, 915 they use it. I believe that the owner stores records in the basement.
In this property?
Yes, from his building next door.
Okay.
But
Did you
that was the
inspect
last time I
property?
spoke to him 4 years ago. They were storing records there.
Yeah, but did you inspect?
Yeah, I've been in it. I've been in it probably, can't remember, a couple years ago. I was in 915, and that was the cat place. And then I've been in 929. Can't remember when I was last in 925 though.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
My question was about the basement, and it's been asked.
I have no questions on this. Now we're going to move on to 260 Kennedy.
Okay. File number 19-2387, roll number 12093623000. The address is 263 Kennedy Street. The owner is 410 Portage Avenue, Incorporated. Roll year under appeal 2020 with a reference date of April 1st of 2018. The assessed value under appeal $2,445,000. Class code 60 and taxable. We have this property listed as a commercial retail store, 1 building, 8 premises, 2 stories. Actual year built of 1922 and effective age applied of 1937. Land area 11,296 square feet, and the gross floor area of the building 27,916 square feet, leasable 22,516 square feet. Flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner has responded to both our 2017 request for income and expense information as well as the sales verification form. And you'll notice that the subject property sale history Subject property sold March 1st, 2017 at $2.4 million, so the sworn value $2.4 million. No subject property leases found in the system. Flip to page 3, and you'll see the rent comparables that I used for this particular property. Try to stick to the downtown area in regards to retail rental rates. They range here between $10 a square foot all the way up to $26.21 a square foot. And that's located on Kennedy as well. Page 4, you'll see the income workup as applied by the model. The rates range, the low end being the substandard basement premise that we have on file, $3.49 up to $16.23. The potential rent there, $256,367. In this instance, we've used a non-model vacancy, so there is a higher level of vacancy in this building. 10% vacancy allowance has been applied. The non-recoverable expense allowance at 2% and shortfall at $650 allows us to get to a net operating income of $211,480. The overall capitalization rate applied by the model, 8.65. The capitalized value rounded at $2,445,000. Page 5 is a summary of that income workup. Page 6 is an aerial photo. You'll see that the subject property is located on the corner of Kennedy Street and Portage Avenue with frontage right on Portage, but also on Kennedy. Aerial photo on page 7. And page 8 has an additional aerial photo and some street view photos. Currently, the only tenant that we have listed for this particular property is the Dawn's photo. So the rest of the building in our system is listed as vacant, hence the higher vacancy allowance that's been given to the property. Page 9 through 12 is the income and expense information as submitted by the owner. Again, there is a sticker at the top, and I'm not sure where that came from, but I would like to address it because it's been a concern. That's on page 9. Looks like there's some sort of an outline of a sticker.
Oh, yeah. There's a reason I asked in the other one was because there was a joint submission, and I knew it was under the sticker. I don't think that this one is of particular interest to us.
Okay.
There were some words under the last one.
Yeah. Page 13 is the income statement that's submitted by the owner for this particular property. They do list some non-recoverables, though I don't know if I would include cash to the owner as a non-recoverable expense. Professional fees is pretty fair to include. Page 14 is the remainder of the income statement and the attached rent roll. Here you can see that there is vacancy in the building. It is an above average vacancy, hence the higher vacancy that's been applied. Page 15 is the cap rate information. Page 16 is the excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act and the addendum package at the back. That is the end of my presentation for this property. I'm open to questions.
So the 10% was the only override on vacancy?
Correct. Yeah. I think the standard would be 6, and we've gone to 10.
Oh, because you're calling this retail.
Yes, it is considered retail. Yeah.
And the other floors, do you recall what they were in use for at one time?
I believe there was a hairstyling academy that was located in the main and second floor.
Yeah.
I don't recall the other tenants.
I think it was Richard Gere was in your house filming a movie. On page, I'm just looking at page 13 and wondering what you make of this, the statement. They're showing a monthly rent of $3,500, yet the year-to-date was $95,000. Obviously, 35 times 12 is nowhere near that. It's about 42,000.
Yeah, it's hard to comment on. Obviously, I don't have the full year's financial. Like, it is the full year's, but
Right.
it's hard to see if maybe there was a lease in place that is no longer in place as of the end of the
A
year.
lost tenant.
It could be, yeah, it could be.
And you did confirm that page 14 coincides with your records that there's only a single tenant left. And it does actually say 402P vacant since October 31st, 2017.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was a statement produced December of 2017.
Correct.
And your sale was dated March 2017, several months prior to the tenant vacating, correct?
Correct.
So they lost the tenant after the sale. Okay, and the Dawn's photo, is that still on the rent book, on the rolls? To your knowledge, is it still there?
I believe so, yeah. But I'm not 100%. I know that it's in our system.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitman?
Is this totally model driven?
With the exception of the vacancy rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 211, 480 net operating income would be model driven,
Yeah, the rest of this stuff that you're seeing is the model.
in spite of the fact that incorrectly or correctly, we have either $40,000 or $95,000 of income, $119,000 by the statement. You'd be at $100,000 more here.
Correct, yeah, so they apply market rent to the vacant space, right?
The model applies.
The model,
market
yeah.
rent to
Yeah.
vacant space. And so we live with that in order to get the value. I guess what I'm wondering, if I can ask this direct question, is the sale price in 2017 driving the model value? Or is it actual numbers driving the model?
Well, it's the model, right? So if the sale was included in the analysis, then that certainly would be a part of some of the sales that are relied upon to establish, income and expense information and
But using other,
other sales
Property
as well.
Not-
Right, not, we
just
wouldn't be
driving the
hanging our
numbers.
hat on the one sale.
okay,
Yeah.
good, that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. Thank you.
Questions, Cynthia?
At what point do you start considering a building being chronically vacant?
I would say that if, a few cycles goes by, we would start to look at, for myself, when I see, if it has a history at the boards and the concern of the applicant is vacancy, and that continues to be a concern, I would factor that into my decision-making, but it is a subjective thing. In this instance, there was a override on the vacancy that was already in place, so I didn't have any part of setting the 10% or changing what was already there, but it had been recognized that this property in particular was above average in regards to the level of vacancy, higher vacancy.
The highest amount you normally would put against that would be 25, though, and that's...
Correct, yeah.
Consider
I
something to be
think
chronic?
there's a bit of a scale. I don't have the exact numbers with me, but yeah, I think it's
Okay.
up to 25, yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
So, sorry, I was a bit distracted earlier. What, did you actually inspect the property?
I inspected this property not for the purposes of this hearing, but to confirm that the hair studio had moved out when I was doing some BA work. So I've walked around the exterior of the property. I haven't been inside the Dawn's photos, but I was on site to kind of see the general condition of the building and see that the one tenant had in fact moved out of there.
When was that?
I believe that was last cycle, so maybe a year, maybe, I would say probably a year ago.
And can you speak to the overall condition of the building?
I would say it's generally in a, fair condition. I don't think that it's necessarily, they're old buildings, right? A lot of these old buildings aren't in the best shape. So, yeah, if I had to classify it as anything, I would say below average condition, fair.
Okay, just wondering, because that's a 20... Okay. Because it's an actual build of 1922.
Yeah.
Do you know why the effective is 37?
No, I don't. So at some point, an assessor would have reviewed either some permit work that was taken out for the property, or if there was no permits and someone noticed that there was work ongoing on site, whatever changes were occurring at that time would be factored into the decision to apply an effective age. But that's not something I have access to, and I don't have it with me now.
Sorry, and your cap rate was model-driven?
Cap rate is
You
model-driven,
didn't
yeah.
override it?
No.
So where on page 15 is your cap rate?
Again, this falls under the retail store category, so it's not shown on there.
Okay. But the burden of proof lies with you, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, apparently they are ready for you next week. Okay, just FYI.
Oh, right, you want to get rid of me.
That's right.
All right,
That's not true, Mr. Neufeld. We do not.
No, we
get
would
rid
love
of
to have you stay here so we get to finish.
okay.
If they only have one left, we only have one left.
I think we should
Yeah.
arm wrestle.
I think we should.
Who's cheering over there?
Marla,
I can take her. Okay.
I will, okay, on this.
Yeah,
it's
give your
me?
presentation on this,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
So the purchase was made at a time when there were plans for the second floor and there was full tenancy on the first floor. And since then, they have not come through. You can see that the vacancy was occurred after the purchase. And when I last spoke to the property manager, they told me that the existing tenant had given notice, so they will be moving on. So essentially, we have an empty building. The methodology applied here, the person who did this was looking at the actual vacancy of 77% and trying to average it with the other things. The issue with this is that once you make your vacancy so high, you've just wiped out your highest and best use. And the problem with the valuation here, of course, is that the resulting number is not supported by land values in the downtown area. Land values in the downtown area have been somewhere around 60 to 75, and in some cases as high as 85 for True North and 110 for the hybrid per square foot. So you have to bear this in mind when you look at any property and you put a vacancy to the point of dropping below that number. So in appraisal math, that break even is closer to 15%, where you have to start thinking about your highest and best use is gone. If you apply a rate higher than that, you got to go to land value. So I've changed my numbers to reflect only a 15% vacancy. So the actual paid rent is $11 for the existing tenant, and we had put $8 on the upper floor space, and so that gets us, after changing the vacancy, that gets our subtotals at $138,440. We've applied 5% non-recoverables, and the structural reserve is indicated. Our shortfall decreases to $18,850. on the lower vacancy. So our NOI is 104,245. The 10% cap rate, of course, would not change. That gives us an indicated value of $1,042,450, 1042450, rounded to $1,042,000. On the land value, that represents $92.25 a square foot, which is a bit higher than the actual sales have been in this area, unless they've been assemblage sales. So that at least satisfies the concern about dropping below the highest and best use on the property. This is a very common methodology, for example, applied in Vancouver, which I've done some work there, where the achieved rents are failing to keep up with land prices, and they've started defaulting to land prices. And the person who prepared this wasn't aware that that's what we should be doing. So our value is $1,042,000, and cap rate comparables, there's a few interesting ones to point out to you on page 35. The first is 423 Main Street, which is two buildings combined. It was Canadian Wheat Board. It was sold after a very interesting exercise by the federal government on due diligence. The actual cap was 10.06%, on city parameters 12.18. Another problem building is right below it, 180 King. It capped at 10% because it's a strata title. And the other one below it is a retail property capped at 10.8%. It capped that high because it has second floor rental space that's not desirable, and it's a bad part of town. Those are the three that I would say support a 10% cap rate. And our income, as I said, is based on actual paid for the sole surviving tenant, and a slightly lower rate for the second floor with a 15% vacancy, supported by land value. Now, one last thing, the number from last year, which I did accept, was a recommendation which at the time was based on a full building. So the tenancy has been lost in that time period. And 2 years is long enough to be deemed chronic vacancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm just gonna. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
I did have
questions?
a couple of questions. So the recommendation that you're talking about from the previous cycle, that was $2,171,000.
That's correct. It was an NOI of $190,000, cap rate 8.75%.
Okay. So the suggestion with the current value is that the vacancy has caused the value to drop by 1.1 million. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, it dropped below that on the income basis, but of course, it still has underlying land.
The land, yeah. Right. This is the land, correct? Or you did an income workup to arrive at the...
At the 1042, but I never exceed 15% on chronic vacancy, because at that point, the income approach doesn't work. It's a mathematical, the shortfall costs are so high that by the time you reach double digits, you're over-expensing your property. A building is always going to have some value to it, and so what we're saying here is that it's basically $60 a foot or $100 a foot for the land.
And in regards to the sale was an open market, arm's length transaction, correct?
Yeah, and yes, it was, and it was, as last year's mailer indicates, full.
have 5,900 feet, 582 feet, and 12,490 feet.
No further questions?
Okay. Mr. Whitburn?
Just a couple of quick ones. I don't see any lease or sale signs on the building. Do you know if it is for lease or for sale? Are they actively trying to lease it?
Well, the pictures we have are very old. Our page 2, for example, still calls it Marble Beauty School, so that's an old picture. Yes, I believe it's available for lease.
Okay. I noted that one of the marble or Marvel signs on the west side has gone off the building in those photos, but who knows why. Do you know when they moved out?
And the only ones that I've shown that I knew the dates of are the ones that I pointed out in the rental assessor's reliable. Because I have...
They took up quite a bit of space.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Okay. And in your new workup, did you include that $20,000 cash to owner?
No.
You took that out?
No.
Out of the non-recoverable?
No, I didn't even use it. We just disregarded it. We put a 5% non-recoverable because it's an unreliable statement, mostly because the vacancy is so huge. Everything's a non-recoverable. You can't do a decent calculation.
Okay. Thank you very much. No other questions?
I just had one point of clarification. You said that, did I hear you say that the current, there's one tenant in there now, and that tenant is also
given notice.
Given notice.
That's why I was asked to bring it to appeal. She
Okay.
said, Pam phoned me and said, they just gave notice. They're filing appeal.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Sorry, and that last tenant is Don's?
Tom,
Okay.
yes, I didn't want to say it on the camera. I wanted our audience to guess what it was.
Did you inspect the property?
I've been in Dawn several times, but not in the... No, sorry, I was in the upper level a few years ago. I don't even remember what was up there.
So you would agree with the assessor on the condition of the property being below?
Yes.
Thank you. And 247 Kennedy?
All right, file number 19-4367. The roll number is 12093629000. The address is 247 Kennedy Street. The owner is 407 Graham Incorporated. Roll year under appeal 2020 with an April 1st, 2018 reference date. The assessed value under appeal $1,072,000. Classification is 60 and taxable. The parcel use is as a commercial retail store. One building with 7 premises, 1 story. Actual year built 1929 and an effective age of 1958. The land area here 4,753 square feet, and the gross floor area of the building at 9,484 square feet. Total leasable area 6,842 square feet. You'll see on page 2 that the owner has responded to both requests for information. The subject last sold in 2014. This is a multi-roll sale, I believe, so I wouldn't put too much weight on it. 2.95. At the bottom of page 2, you'll see the subject property leases that are in our system that are in place. The net rent per square foot ranges from $24 to $26.21. Page 3 are the rental comparables that I've selected for this property. I tried to stick to the downtown area, and it is difficult to find retail net rents from the downtown area. There is a range here though, $10 upwards to $21.49. If you flip to page 4, you'll see that the model ranges in regards to the rents that are applied. The basement spaces having a lower rent applied, $2.25 being the lowest, all the way up to $28.29 for the A2 restaurant chain. That's a Subway that's part of this property. The potential rent there, $100,672, 6% vacancy applied, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $650 a square foot. The net operating income, $90,071. The cap rate applied 8.4% for a capitalized rounded value at $1,072,000. Page 5 is a summary of the income valuation. Page 6 is an aerial map view photo. This property is located on the corner of Kennedy and Graham. There's a few units that are located along Kennedy Street. You can see that on the aerial photo on page 7, along with the street view photos on page 8. Page 9 is the income and expense information that is attached or was submitted by the owner. And here they just refer us to the rent roll and the income statement that they've attached. So page 13, you'll see where the rent roll starts. Again, $24 net rents, all the way up to $26.21 for unit 259. Page 14 is the remainder of the rent roll. It looks like there are some lower rents on here. $21, $10, $13.67. These may be semi-gross, which is why they're not showing on page 2. The subject leases that are shown on page 2 are what are identified as net leases. So if there's missing tenants that are shown on the rent roll and not on page 2 of the brief, that's typically what where that's from. Page 15 is the last page of the rent roll, and page 16 is the income statement as submitted by the owner for the 12 months ending December 31st, 2017. Page 17, cap rate information. Page 18 is Municipal Assessment Act experts, and then our addenda package after that. That is the end of my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Page 4 is the model.
Correct.
I'm looking at your premise IDs, and I'm just trying to match them up with the lease on the rent roll on page 13. Now, I see 1239 matches up. 1239 square feet, that is.
Yep.
840 matches up. I've got a whited out section here, the one at the bottom. We have this, in my copy, I got 520 square feet, that's unit 261. That matches up.
Okay.
Now, so the one that doesn't match is the first one, where I have 1,301 square feet, and I have 1,373. You see that?
I do see that, yeah.
Okay, so we don't agree on that one. And the other numbers you have here are for basement spaces, and where are they noted on the rent roll?
In it looks like on page 14, I would assume that anything that's tagged with a B at the front would be basement.
Right.
Yeah.
But the building operates with 401 grant, correct?
That I'm not certain about.
Well, the rent roll on page 14, which was submitted, includes 401 grant on it. You see 401? They call it 407 grant.
Oh, okay, yeah, I do see that.
And then at the bottom, there are 4 entries for basement space without an area. So do you think maybe some of your basement space may be in the building next door?
Hard to say.
Okay. Now, the rent that's recovered in the basement, there are 2 rented units and 2 vacant units. So they're saying one is $416 with no other recoveries, and the other is $500 with no recoveries. Do you know which one of yours they may correspond to?
No, I couldn't tell you. I do see what you're talking about on the rent roll, like the storage rents you're referring to.
Right. Well, what I'm getting at here is that if these were the smaller units, for sake of argument, and you had 437 square feet at $500 a month, that would indicate a gross rent of $13.73. And did you compare that to the operating costs?
I don't believe so.
Well, the statement on page 16, taking off mortgage interest, it's about $110,000 in total costs. And the rental indicates 12,900 square feet leased. So is it fair to say that those basement rents are just cost recoveries?
It may be.
And they may not even be in this building, correct?
It's hard for me to say.
Okay. You haven't been in here?
I have not been in here for the purposes of this hearing. I have gone into the subway there, but no, I haven't inspected for this hearing.
And because the statement is combined with the property next door, do you have any sort of analysis on the NOI compared to the subject? Were you able to calculate that at all?
Based on the actuals that are provided, no, I did not do that analysis.
Sorry, just getting back to my earlier question, page 16, I noticed that storage space has an income, a gross income of $11,000 for all the storage space in the building.
Correct.
So $11,000 based on what we see here in storage space would indicate we're the marginal income, which is probably below the cost of recovery. It's called a contribution to overhead, is it not?
I'm not too sure.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Nothing.
No, I have nothing either. And I have no questions. Thank you. Shanito?
Thank you. So we have calculated 3,900 square feet, and I did read those numbers before that are coming from the rent roll. But that's exactly 3,900 square feet that the property owner has declared in income. We do have income in the basement. We have not included it because it would actually show a lower value to the board. It's on recoveries only. So what happens if you have zero net income out of the property, but you're only getting recoveries, you're going to lower the value because that space gets added to the shortfall rate. math-wise, I'd be pleased to throw it back in at a zero rent and then have a lower rent. And that's what it is. For years, you can see who the tenant, the users are in the basement. One is Stevenson Management. We're the management company, and they give the owner a little bit of money to store their records. The other's the owner's space they're paying themselves on rent, and the rest is vacant. On that basis, we were looking at the rest of the income, which from the statements we've calculated at 84,825, and taking out the implied net rents on the owner's page, on the assessor's page 4. That would indicate, if this matter were corrected, that we're not that far apart, and their NOI drops to 92,000 and ours is at 84,000. I've been involved with this property since 2003, and it's been very painful all along the way. 4 different sales along the way, always sold with the property next door, gross leases, expenses, joint expenses, and separate income statements, much like the last property we saw today. We're using a 6.1% came from the market, not much different from the assessors, and in this case we've applied a 5% non-recoverable, and that's because the bulk of the leases are, it's a mix of net and gross leases. As a result, you don't have a clearly defined non-recoverable. So we're using a standardized rate of 5% on which would be expected in any appraisal. The structural reserve is based on 25 cents a foot, and shortfall, this is our calculation, 1334 were the costs for the building, and I read that out earlier on the expense side. That's what we had calculated, looking at both of them. And so our shortfall is 3174, NOI 71,669, and I make life easier. I don't have a major disagreement with 8.4%, having looked at these numbers. I think our big issue is minor changes to the other suite paid rent and major and removal of the basement space as just being it's a cost recovery, produces no net revenue. So that changes our number to 853,202, 853,202 rounded to 853,000. The value from the previous year is 917, and that is under appeal at the municipal board. The prior year number was 754,000, and the prior year to that was 538,000. No reason for increases in a property like this because it's got no growth potential. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Just one clarifying question. Did you apply the 8.4?
Yeah, I did. I just changed it. I went to 853,202.
Okay. No other questions?
Thank you. Brett?
No questions.
No, I think I'm good too, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.